Welcome to this episode of the Grants Pass Gospel Rescue Mission Podcast. I am your host, Mission Media Specialist Eric Mortensen, and today I sit down with Executive Director Brian Boteller to talk about the mission's Pathway to Independence program. So let's get started. All right, Brian, why would you say that the mission is so successful at helping people get off the street?
The mission has a fairly well thought out pathway to independence that we've gotten to see worked out, and we've gotten to hone it. You know, we've been around for 40 years, so we've gotten to watch it grow, change, expand over time to what it is today, and we've been, just progressively getting it better all the time. So we're addressing the whole issue of life. We're addressing how did they become homeless, and really trying to deal with the issues that are hard, maybe a little harder to say from a friend or a family member, and maybe a little harder to hear from just somebody in the public shouting at you and stuff. But we're able to walk alongside them and talk with them and discuss these things with them and apply biblical principles to their life as we go.
So how is that accomplished practically?
Well, practically, it's real simple. In fact, it actually, I just made it sound like it's coming with lots of teaching, but it's not really practically done through classwork and teaching. It's really done by taking somebody who was isolated and homeless and moving them into a community immediately, and giving them a safe place to work out. What does that mean to live in community? So, for example, they come in off the streets and they move into a dorm room with maybe up to 20 other people, and there they get to experience how other people impact them, and they also get to feel how they impact other people in some ways, and as they're responsible for taking care of the mess that they create and the messes of others, then they're also recognizing, hey, maybe I shouldn't make such a mess, and things like that. So, and then we also, we do it in the work environment. We do it in the, when somebody comes in, they get put on housekeeping, or maybe they get put in the kitchen, or maybe they get put in, in one of our work centers and a thrift store or something, and they have to work alongside somebody else. And it's not always easy. At first all these little problems start popping up. And what we realize is that these are the problems that person's been carrying with them into their homelessness. And so we get to see it, and we go, oh, these are the issues, and we get to kind of help them address those issues as they come up, and that's part of what really, exposes that. We see it through a lens that's very biblical and very, gospel centered, and because of that, I think it gives us a lot of clarity on what we need to address and how we go about it. So I think that those are the things that really give us the success that we get.
Okay, so I'm going to play devil's advocate here. How long can someone stay at the mission? I've heard 30 days.
I don't know where anybody would have heard that, but you can stay at the mission as long as you're willing to put out the effort towards making progress. So it really just depends. As long as you want to stop being homeless, you can stay at the mission, and that's what progress means for us. Is it's verifiable, documentable evidence that you're actually doing those things necessary to gain your own home, to regain your re-entry back into good society and everything, and so as long as you can make evidence on that, show evidence for it, and demonstrate that you're doing the hard work, you can stay here as long as you need. So for some people, it could be, they might be able to get everything done in 4 or 5 months, and And for many, it takes, maybe, 1 or 2 years. And we're okay with that. We're going to be committed to walk alongside with them as long as they need.
How is resident progress tracked? Is there a review process?
So the review process works. It's a monthly thing and it's monthly because so much of the cycles of our own life happen monthly. I mean, you pay your electricity bill or your water bill or your rent or mortgage or whatever on a monthly basis. And so we just want to get them back into like the cycles and rhythms of regular life. So once a month, you're coming in before a coordinator who's going to ask for what's your evidence for that you've done well and that you're making progress, and that evidence is third-party testimony to the fact that you've been doing well, whether it's by other residents who are part of our program who get to say, he shows up on time, or she's really put in a lot of effort and is real helpful with the rest of staff and things like that. It could be actually documentation, or we said, hey, we need you to open up a checking account, and you actually have to bring in the bank statement that shows that you opened up that checking account. And so it's just evidence. But in addition to that, it's also there's some coaching that's going along the way in that moment. We're talking with them. We're helping them see, hey, look, you did a good job. You made real progress. And we're also kind of going, okay, here's some pointers on how to make the next month go well for you.
Maybe you can walk us through one resident's whole experience from living on the streets to gaining independence. And we can just use a hypothetical homeless person. You got any good names for him?
We'll go with Joe, because I kind of like the whole homeless Joe. Yeah. Homeless Joe. It's the kind of coffee we serve here. Yeah. It's homeless Joe. It's not your regular cup of Joe. Homeless Joe has been living out in the bushes for and along the outskirts of the community for maybe a couple of years. After they got out of jail for some offense that they did, jail or prison for some offense they did, and while they were in jail and prison, they've lost all the other relationships that they had that were valuable. So a spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, they lose all of the valuable friendships and close relationships along the way. All of that, coming out of jail or prison to I have nothing, and really, you're depressed, you're anxious about everything, you don't know how you're going to live life. So what do? Well, you found out, you heard around town that there's some government-sponsored agency that's giving away free tents and sleeping bags, and you go use that to go set up camp next to one of the community parks or something, and so while you're there, you're just getting you recognize that, man, nobody's safe. Everybody's trying to steal from you, lie to you, get something out of you, find out what you actually have inside, so to determine if they want to steal, cut into your tent and take it from you when you're gone or in the night. Add to that you've also got people in the community who would normally be thrilled to be at the park and using the facilities there, but they see you there and they're angry. They're angry because they don't feel safe around you and everything. And so, they don't even know you and you feel judged, and yet the same is true of them. They're angry and they feel judged and they feel not treated fairly. Anyways, so what happens is oftentimes is that a person will start using drugs and alcohol. Methamphetamine, as far as drugs go, is probably one of the most readily available drugs on the street, along with marijuana and alcohol. But both methamphetamine and marijuana both lend themselves to a lot of other mental illness issues, to paranoia, schizophrenia, all kinds of different psychosis and whatnot. So Homeless Joe comes to the mission. By the time they finally have decided, my feet have been wet for too long, and I've got, they're literally rotting in my shoes, and I'm miserable. But somebody recommended, a police officer came by and recommended the mission, and so I'm going to try it out. But that means now I've got to, I started smoking, drinking, and doing drugs to deal with all of my stressors, and to deal with now the fact that I'm not even sure, the voice in my own head versus voices, from coming from other people and everything. And I'm going to come into this place that I don't know what's inside. It's a big blue building. I'm a little scared. I come in, I'm greeted by other homeless guys who come in, and they let me know that I can stay if I agree to some rules. The rules seem steep, right now, because they're rules like I got to get up on time, I got to quit smoking, I got to stop all of these things that were all my coping mechanisms, and I don't know anything about I still don't know what I'm going to get on the second floor of this building. I don't know anything about it, so it's pretty intimidating when I first walk in. They take you in, they put you in front of a computer video that shows you, maybe this conversation, talking about what it is to stay at the mission and what's expected of me. And then I move from there to an application, and where I start telling, giving some information about myself. Again, depending on where my anxieties are, I'm being asked a lot of hard questions, and some of them pretty raw, honest questions, on things. I might be reluctant to even tell them all the truth of what my condition. A little embarrassed, a little ashamed, maybe. At that point, I go to meet a coordinator, and this coordinator is asking me questions. And fortunately, hopefully by this time, I'm starting to kind of get a feel for who's running this place, who's in charge of this place, and I've met some homeless guys coming in the door. They've kind of gone through my stuff. They're making sure I'm safe, and now I'm sitting down with a trained professional, and that's a good process. We get to talk a little bit and find out that they're pretty nice and asking some good questions, and maybe I've had the courage to ask a few questions myself, at that point, about the mission, make sure that, we're both kind of sizing each other up. Am I the right person for this place? Is this the right place for me? And if I check in, if they say yes, then what happens is I'm given back to those RAs, or resident assistants who checked me in, and they're going to take me upstairs and show me a locker and a bunk, and give me a place to put my stuff, and I'm starting a program now.
Let's quickly skip back to the intake interview with a coordinator. What does that include?
So that very first interview with the coordinator is going to include a lot of things, as the coordinator is trying to figure out, how am I going to get this guy independent? How am I going to get Homeless Joe independent? And so they're going to ask a lot of questions. How did you become homeless? They're going to ask questions about, do you have any income? What are you even physically capable of? Have you ever worked before? And what kind of jobs have you done? They're going to be asking about, why are you here and didn't go to your family? Tell me about, your relationship. Do you have any family nearby, and everything? And do you have obligations to them, and, or anything? they're going to be asking questions about, do you have the Oregon Health Plan? Have you received your supplemental nutritional food benefits, your SNAP card? Have you received that from the government? Are you on a HUD waiting list, a low-income housing waiting list of any kind? If you aren't, if all of those are no's, then those are going to be some of the things that we make that the coordinator will ask Homeless Joe to do within the first 30 days. They can usually be done, most of them can be done in a day, but we also recognize that, having a whole bunch of structure can feel like shock and awe that first time. So we're just going to go, well, let's give you 30 days to accomplish this and work through it. We're going to rediscuss some of the just the regular rules of the mission and kind of remind them, you're sure you can do all of these things, right? And they might give them a layout of like, what's the itinerary for the average resident? What time do we get up? What time do we eat meals? What time is chapel? What time is, what's the workload expected of you? And really what the coordinator's trying to find out is, again, what path do I put you on? How do we get you to a place where you are independent and homeful? What's that going to look like? So if you're somebody who has a work history, a good work history, and you're of an age where you can get back into the workforce, that's probably going to be the direction we're looking to head you into. If you're somebody that, maybe is, you're coming in later in life and you're struggling, physically pretty good, and maybe, you're looking for Social Security or a disability thing, we may start looking at moving you into that direction and seeing how we can, expedite that process and get you the funds coming in the right way, at that level. So the 30-day the first step of your pathway to independence is going to be really kind of mapping out that first little leg of your journey. It's what are the baby steps that we need to go to get you really to the base of the mountain trail, because you're about ready to embark on a journey that will feel like, emotionally at times, like you're climbing a mountain. And really what we're trying to do is go, well, climbing a mountain's easier, A, if you stay on the path, and B, if you just work on one step at a time instead of trying to, swallow the whole mountain in one shot, So if I can get you just focusing on the individual steps and working on those, and then, over time, as we do this repeatedly, we'll start to actually take some time to just look back down the path at where you come from and go, wow, look, you've done this now for some time. It doesn't feel like you're at the top of the mountain yet. You had a lot farther to go than you thought. But look at how far you've come.
You're not down in the valley.
You're no longer down in the valley, and you're still making progress, and you're on a path. You're on a path that is well worn, and it's a path genuinely to independence, and that's what we're looking for. Each resident's working on a path. The main measure of progress is really financial. So we're tracking, how do we get this person to a place where they actually have an income, and then it needs to be an income that can sustain them independently. So it needs to be either a full-time job, or if they've got maybe they've got a Social Security income of some kind, then it may be Social Security plus a part-time job. Or it might be, rarely, very, very rarely do we have somebody whose Social Security all by itself is enough to get them through. Most of the time it takes a combination of the two. But we work in that path. So let's just imagine that Joe's the guy with the job. He's gonna apply for a job. After his first 30 days, that's the first thing that we start looking at is what do we got to do to get you into employment? And we start them on an employment, a work search program. And most of our men and women who start that process will find work in our community within, I'd say, about 3 weeks. I mean, it happens relatively quickly. At that point, what we ask them to do is, okay, great, congratulations, you got the job. Now let's look at what do we need to do to make it so that all the money that you earn is really yours. So we'll begin going, I want you to list out all of your debt. I want you to list out, and that goes, I mean, everything. I want to know all your fines and fees from the courts. I want to know any bad debt that you have from, whatever, defaulted on a payment on something somewhere, or maybe it could be back child support or, alimony payments or something like that. Anyways, we just want to list it all. We want to see how big of, because this is part of the mountain that we're going to have to climb. And so we want to see it all so we get a good idea of what it actually is. Then we'll say, well, let's open up a checking account. Let's get in and actually open up with your first paycheck. Let's open up a checking account. And this is where we usually get a more honest answer from homeless Joe about his back debt, because up until now he had forgotten about any debts that he might have. But the minute we talk about opening up a check account, and we'll find out, Joe will say, "Oh, I can't do that." Well, what do you mean you can't do that? And Joe might say, well, I'm on the checks system. I wrote some bad checks before I went into prison or whatever. Or, I owe back child support, and I'm afraid if I open up a checking account, they're just going to garnish everything I put in and those kinds of things. So that's where we usually start getting a more honest look at what's really going on, Joe, how you got here, and how deep of a pit have you gotten yourself into? Because it's funny, the pathway to independence feels like climbing a mountain, but all we're really doing is climbing out of a pit. It's not, we're not climbing any real mountain. It just depends on how far of a pit did we get ourselves into. And in either way, it feels the same. It's still climbing. So you get there and we start listing out the debt. And what we do then is we begin to hold this person accountable. We start holding Joe accountable to a budget. We start saying, okay, hey, look, this is one of the few top times in life where you're going to have the opportunity to pay it all off and start clean, or pay it down to such a degree that it's no longer in control of you, that debt's no longer in control of you. So, pay it down and set up payment plans that are manageable or whatever. Our goal is that you get rewarded that Joe would get rewarded for the hard work they're doing. I think everybody needs a little pocket change, from time to time to experience the benefit of working and being independent and everything. But we're not gonna be buying big screen TVs yet. We're not gonna be buying all those kinds of things yet. So Joe's in this spot where he's been here. At this point we're probably looking at somewhere between 45 days to 60 days, when we're really starting to see a paycheck has come in, and now we're dealing with what are you going to do with that money now that you got it, Joe, and how are you going to keep that job? The fact that you can get one is a big milestone, but how are you going to keep it? And part of the way to keep it is to be able to manage your funds, manage and maintain your finances. So we're going to look at all of those things as we build our way forward. What we want is for Joe to do well at his work and to be able to throw everything he's got into it. But we also want to make sure that in doing that the money's being spent effectively. That we're not taking care of cousins who need to borrow some money here and there or any of that kind of stuff. We're not and we're certainly not. This is not a time to be donating our time, talent, and treasure to the world around us, because it's really not ours if we have debt. So Joe needs to get to the spot where the money that he earns is really his before he can decide what to do with it. So once we've wiped out that debt and we've got everything manageable, then Joe's actually has the ability to be in control of his money. And that's the direction that we're going. So every 30 days we'll be looking at, we'll be asking Joe to bring in pay stubs and a bank statement. And we're going to go down and question everything. We're going to question, every $1.39 that was pulled out of a 7-Eleven, ATM or whatever, a debit card or something, because they wanted a big gulp, right? We're gonna look at everything, and we're going to challenge everything. And we're going to say, hey, you're not taking it. Are you taking advantage of all that we can be for you, so that you can get to the place where you're independent? And that might mean that I need him to not buy his lunch out, but he gets his lunch here at the mission, where he's actually, being provided for in that regards. And it may not be everything that he wants in a lunch, in a sack lunch or anything, but that's okay. He's going to earn. He's working to earn to the place where he can get whatever he wants. But what he wants and what he can afford needs to be the same thing. And part of the way that people get to homelessness is because they've forgotten the difference. They haven't dealt with the fact that our wants sometimes are outside of our means, and so we're living outside of what we can afford. That can cause financial collapse in a family, and financial collapse in a family can cause the breakdown of the entire family. So these are the kinds of things that we're trying to work through, is help them bring their wants and needs in line with what they can afford, and we're trying to expand what they can afford, so that moving forward that they can truly be independent. The next step from there would be to just see that savings begin to develop and grow. We feel like it wouldn't be uncommon for Joe to get a job, get some money, get an apartment, lose his job. Things happen. I mean, we just went through COVID, for crying out loud. Things happen that are sometimes outside of our control, and we lose employment. And the question is just going to be, well, what do you do then? If we're only living from paycheck to paycheck, then the minute he loses the job, he loses his home, and he has to come back to the mission. So our goal is to build up a savings, help them understand the value of building up a savings, so that Joe has anywhere from 3 to 5 months of savings in the bank that he doesn't touch. He doesn't go out and spend from that. That's his reserves, so that when he gets out and gets his place, gets his apartment, moves in with his new roomies, moves back in with family or whatever it is. If something happens and maybe he gets injured at work or the job lays him off or whatever, it's no problem. He's already proven he can find a job, and he can do it pretty quickly. And so he doesn't need to panic. What he does is now he taps into those reserve funds to pay for his lifestyle and continue doing that while he's out looking for work. And let's say it takes him another 3 or 4 weeks to find a job. It's okay. He's not worried because he's got some stability going on, and he can weather that kind of a storm. And even if it takes another 2 or 3 weeks for him to get into a full paycheck cycle, he could potentially be out of income, out of revenue coming in for 2 months, and still find his way solidly forward without panicking, because he's got it in reserves, and because he's planned well, and because he continues to follow the same path that got him here in the first place. The same path that got him to independence will keep him independent as long as he continues to follow the path. And it's the path that really anybody and everybody out there who's doing life well is probably doing anyways, for the most part. And so that's kind of the importance of that path. Now, if Joe had been on Social Security or some kind of disability income or something like that, the path is going to be virtually identical. It's still going to be, you have to get the disability award. You have to get your whatever pay you've got, coming in. You're still going to have to figure out, pay off your debt and take care of all that stuff. You're still going to have to get to where you manage that income, to where the income that you have is manageable and enough to sustain you. The one thing I think that happens for a lot of guys is that they imagine, they come in imagining that what they're going to do is find a single 1-bedroom apartment that is affordable for them on whatever their entry-level wage is, and that's almost doable nowadays, because entry-level wages have gone up, to ridiculous degrees. But what we do is we'll move somebody once they've met all of their goals, once we've gotten to where their debt's paid down or off, once they've got a job that is solid and they're working in the right direction, once they've got savings going up, we'll have them look at. We'll make sure that by this time their driver's license should be back. They should have gotten their driver's license and hopefully a vehicle at this point in time as well. They will have gone in and connected with counselors for addictions and mental health issues. They will have gone through and maybe even connected in their church, got some relational counseling of different kinds, whatnot. So all of these things have taken place during their time up to this point, and we're starting to go, okay, this person's just about ready to get out and find a home. And in fact, it could happen at this point in time, at any point in time, at about this stage, and often does. But one thing that we'll do is when we recognize that there's stability, that Joe is now, he seems to have a comfort level walking the path. He seems to be managing the ins and outs of his own budget and keeping his job well. That we'll start to say, well, what if we can fit him into one of our transitional programs? And in this case, we have a place called Hope House for men, and Joe would certainly qualify to go into Hope House. Hope House is really designed to be kind of a staging while he's looking for home, while he's looking for the next future home. And, housing is still tight in our community. It's tight everywhere across the country. It's tight. So houses don't just readily appear. 1-bedroom apartments don't readily appear, all the time. And there's a lot of competition for them. So, Hope House, can accommodate 3 guys at a time. And we up their program fees a little bit at Hope House, and he'll start paying about $400 a month to stay in that program. And he'll have fewer roommates. Now he'll have 1 to 2 roommates that he'll be living with in this transitional home. And what we'll do is we'll require less of him because he's staying in this transitional home. So he won't have the rigors of a stay in the mission itself. He's still expected to go to church on Sunday, but apart from that, and he's still expected to do a 30-day review where we're looking at him, a continual, we want to make sure he's on the path to independence still, and we want to make sure he's staying there. So he'll still be being reviewed every month, but the pressure's kind of taken off, and what we're really trying to see is, how do you do now with the training wheels taken off? How's life looking there? And here's the interesting thing that happens as Joe stays at Hope House is really he begins to find some hope. He begins to make friends with the other guys that he's rooming with. There's trust that's really developed. And a lot of times what will end up happening is Joe and his roommates will decide, I didn't like staying with 50 other men at the mission, but 2 other guys is kind of fun. And I'm not lonely. It's, we're friends. We hang out together. We attend church together. We do things together. What about if we rented a room together? What if we rented a house together? Well, now Joe and his roommates can afford a whole lot more, and it's easier to get into a 3-bedroom house. They're quicker to come up onto the market than single-bedroom apartments come up on the market. And they usually have better accommodations. A single-bedroom apartment might have a little tiny mini fridge and a stove that, maybe a microwave or something. And those are the kinds of things that in a home will often have, full-on dishwasher, nicer, accommodations and stuff. Maybe multiple bathrooms, maybe a better yard and some things like that. So you can have friends and family come over and visit and things of that nature. So oftentimes that's exactly what happens with Joe, is that he reconnects that way and gets back into community that way. And even if Joe decides at some point in time that he does want his own place, maybe he moves up the corporate ladder wherever he's working and starts making enough money that he can afford to pay for his own 3-bedroom home or something along those lines. This home that they've rented now becomes just an extension, a continuing extension of the good work that we're doing at the mission, because a lot of these guys will know people still coming through the mission that have now moved into Hope House. And so they'll say, hey, we've got a room open. You can come and rent and take Joe's place, and how cool is that it just continues to extend its way out. But what we've done is we've networked a community. What we've done is we've reintroduced them into the benefits of community. Joe at one time was living in the park, fearful and angry at the community around them, and the whole community was fearful at him and his behavior. And now he's made this transformation all the way over to a genuine community, a genuine network of friends and family that are easily welcoming him because he's successful, because he's taking care of life and he's responsible for his actions and the life that he lives. He has something to offer genuinely to everybody around him instead of just begging and need and threat and everything. And so it's really amazing to watch the scope of the transformation that takes place when somebody really walks through the program of the Gospel Rescue Mission. The pathway to independence is really a pathway to community, and it's a pathway to family and homefulness. It's all of those good things and it doesn't feel like a classroom structure or anything. It's just all learned experientially along the journey.
And I think we'll leave it there for this episode of the GRM podcast. I want to thank Brian Boteller for taking the time to talk with me today and explaining the ins and outs of the Pathway to Independence program. To learn more about the mission, give us a visit at grantspassmission.org.